Khamenei rejects US talks, calling nuclear demands a dead end. Trump warns Iran must never get nuclear weapons. Macron urges compliance or face UN sanctions. IAEA ready to return if sanctions snap back. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has ruled out negotiations with the United States, dismissing Washington's demands on uranium enrichment as unacceptable and describing any talks under current conditions as a dead end. Speaking in a televised address on September 23rd, Khamenei said that dialogue with the United States would neither serve Iran's national interests nor avert potential harm. He argued that Washington had predetermined the outcome of any negotiation, insisting that Iran abandon its nuclear enrichment activities entirely. Khamenei said this approach amounted to dictation rather than genuine negotiation.
My point is that with the current situation, perhaps in 20 years or 30 years, a different situation may exist, and we are not dealing with that. In the current situation, negotiating with the American government, firstly, does not help our national interests. It does not benefit us in any way, and it will not ward off any harm from us. We did not yield, and we will not yield. We did not yield to pressure in this matter, and we will not yield to pressure in this matter or any other. This great achievement, enrichment of uranium that our country has strived for, spent so much on and overcome so many difficulties for, to dismiss all this effort, all the product of these endeavors, smoke it and obliterate it. That's what not having enrichment means. It's obvious that a proud nation like the Iranian nation would have this statement uttered in its mouth and would not accept this statement. Negotiating with the US under the current circumstances carries significant losses for the country, some of which could be said to be irreparable. Such damages it will have. Behind the negotiating table with the US and the result of the talks we will have with them being that whatever he says must be done. That is no longer negotiation, that is dictation, that is imposition. The other side, though he might say, I give you such and such a concession for this thing, is lying. What they say we give as concessions are lies. Today they say if you have enrichment, we will do this and that. Tomorrow they say if you have missiles, we will do this and that. And then they say, if you don't have relations with such and such country, we will do this and that. If you have relations with such and such country, we will do this and that. We are constantly threatened and forced to retreat from the threats of the enemy. That is, no honorable nation would engage in negotiations accompanied by threats, and no wise politician would approve of it.
He further rejected US calls to curb Iran's missile program, warning that such restrictions would leave the country empty-handed and unable to defend itself in the face of threats. According to Khamenei, accepting talks under pressure would only encourage further demands and weaken Iran's sovereignty. He said no honorable nation could accept such terms.
This opposite side of us, America, breaks its promises in everything, lies in everything, deceives, makes military threats at any time. If they get the chance, they will assassinate people, just as they assassinated our martyred general, martyr Qasem Soleimani. If they can, they will do these things, or they will bomb nuclear centers. This side, that is in this kind of situation, it is impossible to negotiate with this side. It is impossible to sit down and talk with confidence and trust, listen to what is said, and make an agreement. In my opinion, negotiating with the United States on the nuclear issue, and perhaps on other issues, is a complete dead end, meaning there is no right way, it is a complete dead end. Today, we are at a high level in terms of uranium enrichment. Of course, countries that want to make nuclear weapons can enrich up to 90%. Since we don't need weapons and we have decided not to have nuclear weapons, we didn't increase it. We increased it to 60%. It's a very high figure. It's a very good figure, and it's necessary for some of the things we need in the country. We did not give in, and we will not give in. We did not give in to pressure in this matter or in any other matter. We did not give in to pressure, and we will not give in to pressure.
On the issue of enrichment, Khamenei reaffirmed Iran's refusal to suspend or eliminate the program. He stressed that the country would not submit to foreign pressure, adding that Tehran does not seek nuclear weapons and has no intention of producing them. The remarks came shortly after US President Donald Trump told the United Nations General Assembly that Iran must never be allowed to possess nuclear arms. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry confirmed that Tehran and European powers have agreed to continue discussions on the country's disputed nuclear program in an effort to avert the reimposition of UN sanctions. At the United Nations General Assembly, President Donald Trump reiterated that Iran must never be permitted to acquire nuclear weapons. He alleged that Tehran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism and said it could not be trusted with what he called the most dangerous weapon.
There is no more serious danger to our planet today than the most powerful and destructive weapons ever devised by man, of which the United States, as you know, has many. Just as I did in my first term, I've made containing these threats a top priority, starting with the nation of Iran. My position is very simple. The world's #1 sponsor of terror can never be allowed to possess the most dangerous weapon. That's why shortly after taking office, I sent the so-called Supreme Leader a letter making a generous offer. I extended a pledge of full cooperation in exchange for a suspension of Iran's nuclear program. The regime's answer was to continue their constant threats to their neighbors and U.S. interests throughout the region and some great countries that are right nearby. Today, many of Iran's former military commanders, in fact, I can say almost all of them, are no longer with us. They're dead. And 3 months ago, in Operation Midnight Hammer, 7 American B-2 bombers dropped the 14 30,000-pound each bombs on Iran's key nuclear facility, totally obliterating everything. No other country on earth could have done what we did. No other country has the equipment to do what we did. We have the greatest weapons on earth. We hate to use them. But we did something that for 22 years people wanted to do. With Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity demolished, I immediately brokered an end to the 12-day war, as it's called, between Israel and Iran, with both sides agreeing to fight no longer.
The comments came as the Assembly opened its 80th session in New York, with nearly 150 heads of state and government scheduled to address the chamber over 6 days. On the sidelines, Iran's foreign minister has described recent strikes on its nuclear facilities as a dark and dangerous chapter in the history of non-proliferation. Speaking in New York during the United Nations General Assembly, Abbas Araghchi said the attacks, carried out between June 13th and 25 and attributed to Israel and the United States, killed nuclear scientists, senior commanders, and civilians, including children. He denounced the operations as a criminal assault on Iran's sovereignty. Araghchi argued that the strikes made it impossible for inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency to continue their work as before. He pointed to a new framework agreement with the agency as proof of Iran's goodwill, saying it ensures Tehran safeguards obligations despite what he called unprecedented violations. French President Emmanuel Macron has warned that Iran faces a stark choice: return to compliance on its nuclear program or face the reimposition of United Nations Security Council sanctions. Speaking during the general debate of the UN General Assembly, Macron said the coming hours would be decisive, urging Tehran to allow inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency to carry out their work and relocate enriched uranium stockpiles. He added that he would meet with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian to address the issue directly.
The coming hours will be decisive. Either Iran makes a move, re-engages in a path of peace and responsibility that allows us to return to that path and lets the IAEA do its work, or sanctions will be re-implemented. I will have the opportunity to discuss this tomorrow with President Pezeshkian.
Macron placed responsibility for the lack of compromise squarely on Tehran, stressing the need to restore what he described as a reliable and verifiable framework to deter nuclear proliferation and ballistic missile threats. He said such a system already exists and should be urgently reinstated. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, echoed Macron's call, warning that time is running out. Speaking to reporters in New York, Kallas said diplomacy still has a chance, but demanded real action on the Iranian side before deadlines expire. On the sidelines of the General Assembly, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held talks with his British, French and German counterparts, along with Kallas. The discussions were described as a final effort to prevent sanctions from snapping back automatically under the nuclear deal's dispute mechanism. European powers have accused Tehran of breaching its obligations under the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, a charge Iran rejects. For now, both sides appear to be weighing diplomacy against the prospect of renewed sanctions. The head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog says his inspectors are prepared to return to Iran if sanctions are reimposed under the nuclear deal's snapback mechanism. Rafael Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, said that cooperation with Tehran must remain permanent, regardless of political disputes. He noted that while inspections had resumed after recent strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, access to sensitive uranium stockpiles remains restricted.
We are in the maybe final hours before the activation of the reinstatement of sanctions, the so-called snapback, as you say. And quite clearly, this is a matter of concern for Iran. In the context of our consultations and negotiations with them, this issue features quite prominently, of course. I saw the foreign minister yesterday. I will see him again today. Like other, important participants in this process, starting, of course, with E3, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and, of course, the United States. So I would say there is an intense process of consultations and conversations at the moment, trying to assess whether there is a possibility to find a solution which could prevent that from happening. Of course, there is a dimension which is beyond my own remit, quite clearly, on the political sphere for the countries that decided to launch this process to decide and see. But of course, we are trying to play a role as guarantors and inspectors of any sort of agreement. We are trying to facilitate these talks, so we together land on a better place than we are today, because the trajectory that we are going into is one of, quite clearly, of further distancing rather than converging. So we are trying to help.
Grossi confirmed Iran still retains the ability to rebuild parts of its program, though the recent attacks caused significant damage to centrifuges and facilities. The IAEA chief urged diplomacy, stressing that dialogue with all parties, including Iran, Europe, the United States and Russia, remains essential. He also reminded Tehran of its obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, even as hardliners in Iran call for reconsidering the country's position. Sanctions are set to return unless an agreement is reached this week.